The Honourable Kyle McGINN.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that calls on the McGowan government to recognise that regional Western Australia has the opportunity to develop ever closer sea freight trading links with Asia in a post-COVID world and focuses on West Australian employment. 2, support shipping initiatives and direct general shipping for ports in the Pilbara and elsewhere up the coast, including provisions for future emergency transport needs.
Members, the Honourable Kyle McGINN has moved the motion standing in his name. The question is the motion be agreed. The Honourable Kyle McGINN.
Thank you, Madam President. I am very happy to bring forward this motion today for the debate here in the Council. As members are well aware, before coming into Parliament, my background was in seafaring, and I'm very proud to say that I'm an Australian seafarer and an MUA member. It is becoming almost like sightings of the Loch Ness Monster or the Yowie to spot an Australian seafarer these days, and quite frankly, it's sad. I'm a second-generation seafarer, and if I do have kids, it is very unlikely to see a third-generation seafarer in my family. I will touch on many points in the limited time that I have, from flag of convenience shipping, state shipping, emergency situations where shipping would assist, opportunities for Western Australian ships to export and import in and out of Asia, the Ruby Princess and other matters that are relevant to this motion. Members, we are an island nation. Simplified, we are surrounded by water. We move trade around the country from all sorts of industry. We also import and export ridiculous amounts of trade. So it is easy to say we rely on shipping in this country. You would think, knowing this, that Australia would have a strong, flourishing shipping industry filled with Australian workers on ferries, state ships, export ships and more, powering the wealth of our nation. But, honourable members, it is a far, far cry from that. We are on our knees in this country. We have been attacked by unwarranted attacks, followed by more unwarranted attacks from our federal government, particularly the Liberal National Government. Ships taken off the coast and replaced with foreign manned ships. I'll remind the House, as I've spoken on it before, the putrid treatment of Australian workers on board the MV Portland. This was an absolute disgraceful situation. The MV Portland was a ship carrying its cargo for Alcoa. I think the opposition has a former boss of Alcoa sitting in its ranks in the other place, and it wouldn't surprise me if he was part of the decision that was made. This ship was full of Australian workers, carried cargo between Kwinana and the Port of Victoria for over 27 years. Within that 27 years, there was not one industrial stoppage, so there was no issues on that domestic trade. But Senator Michaela Cash and her cronies, in the form of security heavies, dragged Australian workers down the gangway and kicked them off their ship in the middle of the night and frog-marched foreign labour up the gangway, replacing good quality Aussie jobs with exploited foreign labour. The MV Portland was a domestic trade ship, not a foreign ship, a domestic trade ship. How is it in our country, that is an island nation, we allow jobs to be stripped off our coast, despite the fact that the federal government was providing financial support to Alcoa? That is absolutely shameful, that we are providing support to a company to replace Australian jobs. And just to be very clear, domestic trade means this vessel never left the country. This vessel, which the route now is replaced with a foreign flagged vessel with foreign labour, runs between Kwinana and Portland in Victoria with foreign labour on it. Domestic trade, not going overseas, domestic trade. As a proud ex-union organiser for the MUA who represents seafarers and waterfront workers right across this country, I have seen the disgusting treatment by federal governments towards Australian seafarers. What concerns me more is the disgraceful multinationals such as BHP, Reinhardt, FMG, Rio Tinto and all their other friends. These companies like to put out fluffy media releases and TV ads like The Big Australian, begging Australians to believe they are supporting Aussie workers. Why is it that on mine sites we have Aussies? Well, sometimes. With construction jobs, we have seen foreign labour brought in, and I know up at Roy Hill there was some issues with foreign labour, but majority of the time we see Australians filling these roles, as we've had debates many times about FIFO workers. But as soon as the product leaves the mine site, that's it as far as local workers are concerned. They spruik local employment and economy building in Western Australia, but at the same time, everything they export, everything is on ships, and that are foreign manned ships, and under flags of convenience. So a flag state would be Panama or Liberia. So the ships are not Australian flag, so have no loyalty to this country whatsoever. It infuriates me when you see things up in the northwest like Twiggy Forrest cracking a bottle of wine on the hull of a ship and saying how proud he is to have an Aussie ship, when he knows that he is going to fill that ship with foreign, cheap, exploited labour. I remember having a conversation with BHP early on in my term, pushing them to see them return Australian seafarers to our coast. They are, after all, exporting our resources. I asked, do you have any ships or any ships that are manned with Aussies, any Aussie ships? No, we don't. Our shipping is what you would call Uber shipping. So they basically just go to market with however much tonnage they're going to export, and ships that are from overseas sit out there at the harbour on anchor and put in the lowest bid they can and get that work and then take it overseas. So we're mining it, transporting it to the port and then wiping our hands of it. There needs to be a better connection with Australian workers taking our resources overseas, which will protect us in times of crisis, which we find ourselves in now. Some quick facts on flag of convenience. There was over 9,315 vessel visits in WA ports in 2019. How many jobs could we have seen in that? Western Australia has received the highest number of complaints under the Maritime Labour Convention in 2006 in 2019, the highest amount of complaints. And these complaints were 39% were because of underpayments of wages. So not only are they getting paid pennies, they're not even getting paid. Regional Western Australia, in my view, has the most to gain by seeing Western Australian ships work our coast. There is so many opportunities where we could have safer and more reliable transport. Australian seafarers are reliable, loyal and have West Australian priorities at their core. I get a bit emotional when I talk about state shipping, so bear with me, members. WA had a proud and powerful state shipping industry. Keyword had. In the early 1900s, we had, similar to today, an unreliable private shipping industry. When I say unreliable, I mean they are working their contracts for their foreign investors, so they don't have the state's matters at the highest interest. Towns like Wyndham, Derby and others in the northwest faced famine and were not getting supplies supplied to them. This forced the state to open state shipping, and our service started in 1912 with the first state ship, the Una, coming from petitioning and lobbying. Merchant seamen on state ships have always had involvement in wartime, from saving crews from sunken ships to being bombed like the Kaluma alongside the Wyndham port by the Japanese. Not only did state ships do cargo operations vital to this state, but many ships doubled as passenger ships, right from the start till the demise in 1970. So think about this. We rely heavily on tourism. Tourism, tourism, tourism is something that we say. The first tourists to the northwest came from state ships. The first tourists. Across regional WA, a massive talking point has been the high cost of airfares. Depending on the season, we can see road closures that cut off parts of the north, and we want, well, before COVID and after it, we want international tourists to see and visit all our great holiday destinations, such as Exmouth, Coral Bay, Shark Bay, Karratha, Karanjini, Broome, and further into the north. I strongly believe, and have done for many years, there is an industry for state shipping. Not the same model as previous, but an industry that will grow tourism, power WA and give us safety on our coast. Think back to the floods in the Kimberley in recent years, where we've seen WA roads closed and communities cut off. If we had a state ship, the trucks that were lined up at the borders could have made their way to Port Hedland or Karratha, loaded critical supplies like food onto the ship and delivered it up the coast. Over Christmas, we've seen out near the Kalgoorlie, we've seen our borders shut on the air highway, and at the same time, the borders were shut up in Kununurra. We had a bushfire raging down in the goldfields. So we were cut off. Luckily, this did not last a period long enough to be catastrophic. Having even the one state ship running around the coast and interstate could have been crucial to bringing much-needed supplies. There are proposals out there for a state ship that is half cargo, half passenger. Imagine if we had a state ship full of Australian skippers, Australian officers, Australian seamen and Australian engineers. All West Australians departing from Fremantle with West Australian and international tourists. Also with cargo destined for the north. Trucks will be reduced on the roads. Regional roads have enough issues with trucks damaging them, and also how dangerous truck driving can be. This would reduce the amount of movements of trucks. It could stop in places such as Exmouth. Passengers could jump off, enjoy all the great tourism opportunities they have in Exmouth, and then get on the return sail. Could stop in Karratha, Headland, Broome, Wyndham, and then head over to Singapore, the gateway to Asia. We could get into Singapore directly on a run that's guaranteed to be on time all the time. So at each port it could have passengers disembark and cargo unloaded, also cargo put on to head further north. Cargo could ensure that the tickets for passengers would be cheaper. Imagine we could be supplying direct into the Singapore market some of our world-class beef from Broome. I really want to see abattoirs opened up, boxed meat sent overseas directly from Broome into the Singapore market. To me, I just think that there is an opportunity there. Now, not only that, all the other great things we have between here and Broome that could be loaded onto that vessel as it goes over to Singapore. I really believe there is an opportunity for us to go into that market with West Australian workers from the state. If we look at cruise ships, a massive market pre-COVID, there was no Aussies on there working. It was foreign manned. Why can't we have Aussie flagged and manned ships? It is ridiculous the federal government does not fight for our rights for Australian workers to get on these ships. It's a lucrative industry. Where are you, Scotty? You know, you're out there spruiking all these things about jobs. It's on the doorstep, mate. New South Wales had the Ruby Princess, which caused chaos right across Australia. There'll be plenty to come out of that in forms of investigations, I have no doubt. Imagine if that ship was Aussie flagged and if it had Aussie crew on it and it was under Australian law. We would have had higher safety standards. We would have had Aussie seafarers that would have been vigilant about the risks of COVID-19, identified where the problem was much earlier and be methodical about getting the issues resolved. I understand there are challenges, but the benefits could be so much greater for our state if Aussie seafarers got back their right to work in this country. State shipping is not a pipe dream. It is a real industry that could be possible around this country, and it just takes one state to lead the way, and I believe this could be the state. Now, one of the key things I want to talk about is the ability for a state ship to jump in an emergency situation. We have all these private ships on and off the coast around Australia, but there was a situation, the bushfires over in the east coast. There's a real example of the benefits of what a state ship could bring. I read an article written by organiser George Gakis. It's titled "The Australian Seafarer, True Working Class Hero of Today." On board, both the Far Senator and the Far Saracen, along with the Navy vessel the Sagamore and Eden tugs, were at the forefront of ensuring that people survived the fires that have been burning our country. Everyday people were trapped in various places across the east coast of Australia. To many lost their lives throughout these fires, but Australian seafarers delivered when they were needed most. All of the crew engaged on the Far Saracen worked an average minimum of 14 hours a day whilst on site in Malakuta. They provided assistance to those who were trapped on the beach with fuel, water, food and shelter. Some of the vital emergency service people were housed on board, the same people that many of us take for granted most days. General public that were severely injured or ill just needed a break from the smoke were also looked after on board. The crew had a young family stay on board. One of the family members was a 7-month-old child. Given that there was no multi-cat vessels, there was no landing craft vessel and there was no wharf, their vessel could not be tied up. Hundreds of pallets of stores were broken down on board by hand. They were then manually loaded onto the FRC, which is a fast rescue craft, very small vessel, and taken ashore by those workers on the Far Saracen. Keep in mind that there was no way in or out of this town by land. It was because of these workers that thousands of people have lived to tell the story of the Malakuta bushfires. It's a real wonder why any government wouldn't be seeking to have more Australian crewed ships on the coast, which would assist in times of emergency and need. I couldn't have said it better myself. It is really important to me, and I will continue to stand up for Australian seafarers in this country, and I strongly believe that there is a need for us to have vessels of our own in times of crisis and in times of economy building. Thank you very much.
The question is the motion be agreed. I'm going to call the Honourable Matthew Swinburne.